All right, what's up, everybody? Good morning. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Morning Scone presented by Brock, the Baton Rouge Orthopedic Clinic, Hudco Roofing, HudcoRoofing.com, and MyCleanLiving.net. All tagged in the Facebook post. Appreciate y'all for being here with us. LSU has a new head football coach, Brian Kelly from Notre Dame, after 12 seasons in South Bend. He's the new BMOC, the big man on campus there at LSU. So news broke yesterday, announcement formally today from LSU, press conference as I understand it. Well, Justin Vincent, I guess, kind of broke that news, didn't he? Press conference planned for Wednesday on LSU's campus. So all's well that ends well, I suppose. You made your run at Lincoln Riley. He picked USC over LSU, but ultimately Scott Woodward went back to the well with Brian Kelly, where they had been early in this process, and they were able to get a deal done. If you were with us on a special edition of Nightcap with Scone last night, shared the contract figures that I heard. Again, I know Dennis Dodd tweeted $15 million a year. That's absurd. I can't believe he tweeted that number without having that confirmed. But what I was told is 10 years, around 9.5 per, with incentives that could get him closer to 10. So basically $100 million contract. Like you make a bowl game, it's $500,000 sort of thing. So at 60 years old, that contract should take Brian Kelly to the end of his coaching career. If he wants to coach past 70, whatever. Does he coach out the length of this contract? Don't know. Some of the word out of South Bend was maybe Brian Kelly might only coach a few more years, 2-3 more years. But anytime you start a new job and a new challenge, it tends to re-energize you. And, Brian Kelly's 60, Ed Ogeron's 60. So I don't really worry about the age thing. Obviously, this isn't a 20-year hire, but few are. Before Les Miles, LSU hadn't had a coach in Baton Rouge more than 5 seasons since Charles McClendon. So, if you get 10 years out of Brian Kelly, fantastic. The other initial reaction that I have is, I think most people don't understand how difficult it is to recruit and win in South Bend. In a bygone era when the only teams that were ever on TV were Notre Dame and USC and Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama, they got tremendous exposure and they had a lot of brand awareness. And so people wanted to go there. Nebraska, people wanted to play there. Well, the NBC deal, when it first started, before every game was on TV, the NBC deal was massive for Notre Dame because they were the only team that was on TV every single week. Well, now every team is on TV every single week. And so Notre Dame doesn't have that advantage. The other thing, too, is it's really hard to get into Notre Dame, and they don't lax those standards for their athletes. So when you're recruiting to South Bend, you're recruiting with one hand tied behind your back because you're eliminating a large portion of the recruiting pool because it's kids that can't get into Notre Dame. In a similar sense that Stanford or Vanderbilt has. So Notre Dame has obviously had more success and done at a higher level in those programs, but you wonder why Notre Dame wins a lot, and then when they run into a juggernaut in a New Year's Six or a former BCS game, why they come up short? It's because they're not as good. I mean, when you look at did this last night on Nightcap. If you look at Notre Dame's current recruiting class, you got to keep in mind, y'all, there is no talent in Indiana. So you have to recruit nationally. Notre Dame has 23 commits right now. 3 from California, 2 from Indiana, 2 from Michigan, 2 from Jersey, 1 each from Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, and Washington. 18 states. They have commitments from 18 different states, y'all. Like, you want to recruit at Notre Dame, you got to get on a plane and fly to go see kids. At LSU, Just drive across the basin and go see the number one quarterback in the country. Go down, drive to the Bayou and go see Mason Smith, the number one defensive tackle in the country. You know what I mean? Going to New Orleans and recruit Jamar Chase or Keyshawn Butte. I mean, y'all, it's a different reality for him. And as beautiful a campus as Notre Dame is, South Bend is a dump, y'all. It's hard to recruit there. I mean, you see the sun about 3 months out of the year. I mean, I live there. It's, aside from the campus, ain't much there, y'all. So it's hard to get a kid from California or South Florida or Louisiana or Texas to go up to South Bend, Indiana. It just is. So, and he's done a great job of it, man. So, on field, he's an offensive guy, runs different spread concepts. He's made really good hires. Obviously, Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator, is who LSU pursued last year. Ultimately, picked Notre Dame over LSU. One really odd thing about this. I think Notre Dame's going to make the playoff. You can call me crazy, but you were one upset away. You were one upset away this weekend from Notre Dame being in a playoff. If Iowa beats Michigan, Notre Dame's in. If Houston beats Cincinnati, Notre Dame's in. If Baylor beats Oklahoma State, Notre Dame's in. Any of those upsets happen, Notre Dame's in the playoff. So, and there's no way he's coaching them in the playoff. Now, maybe his thought is, look, even if we get in with a 4 seed and we're playing Georgia, we're going to get our head stomped in. Maybe. But considering he was willing to leave his team, which is still in a playoff mix, as crappy as that is for those guys, it shows how committed he was to this job. So, to taking the job. So, I like it a lot, y'all. I don't know. I mean, I'll say this again. At the time of the hiring, this is the best coach LSU has ever hired. At the time of hiring. I mean, we've run through it. I'll go all the way back to Dietzel. Then Charles McClendon, who had never been a head coach at the time he was hired. To Bo Ryan, who was a young coach, had some success, but certainly not this. Jerry Stovall, LSU was his first job. Bill Arnsparger had been an NFL head coach for like 3 years with the Giants and it was like 7-21, had a losing record. Mike Archer, first head coaching job. Curly Hallman came from Southern Miss. Jared DiNardo had a losing record as a head coach when he got hired away from Vanderbilt. Nick Saban was above 500, but wasn't nearly as accomplished. 5 seasons at Michigan State or 4 seasons at Michigan State. Same with Les. 4 seasons at Oklahoma State was 28-21. And then Ogeron was 10-25 at Ole Miss when you hired him. So, I mean, it's by far the most accomplished coach you have ever, at the time of hiring, you have ever brought in the history of LSU football. More than 260 wins, winningest coach in Notre Dame history. He's won everywhere he's been. Won Division II national championships at Grand Valley State. He won at Central Michigan. He had won at Cincinnati, had an undefeated season there. He's got Notre Dame in the playoff twice. Was in a BCS championship game. It's I don't know what else to say. It checks every box. And he fills in the gaps where Ed was deficient. He brings a level of maturity and discipline and steadiness that Ed Ogeron lacked. And that happens sometimes in coaching hires. You want to basically the opposite of what didn't work. And I think that's clearly what Scott Woodward has done here. So very exciting. Very exciting. All right, let's say some good mornings, see what y'all got here. Do me a favor if you're on Facebook, like the page, share the post. YouTube, smash that like button. We had like 4,000 people watching us last night. We did a emergency live stream. So thanks to everybody who watched last night. And if you're new there to the YouTube channel, do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel and smash the like button. Thank you so much. Let's see, Shannon O'Neill, happy the wait is over. Hong Tam Nguyen, good morning. Christopher Merrill, so glad the search is over. Me too. Brandon Hoyt hopefully takes Freeman with him. So that's an interesting question. And I will suggest this. Marcus Freeman is the most obvious choice to be the interim head coach at Notre Dame. And my guess is Notre Dame is going to try to hire Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. And Fickell's always wanted one of those big Midwestern jobs. Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, like that's what he's wanted. So I think Notre Dame is going to hire Luke Fickell, which would be interesting. That would be back-to-back Cincinnati coaches they hire because they hired Brian Kelly away from Cincinnati. If Notre Dame hires Luke Fickell, then Cincinnati probably hires Marcus Freeman. So if I had to guess today, you do not get Marcus Freeman in Baton Rouge. If I had to guess, I think you do not get Marcus Freeman in Baton Rouge. But when you're willing to pay coordinators you're paying David Aranda 2-3. You paid 2 first-time coordinators 7 figures this year. LSU will be able to recruit good coordinators. I do believe, from what I heard, Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, is planning on coming with Brian Kelly. Although I do know that Tommy Rees has interest in being a head coach. Might have interest in the ULL job. So to be determined. Tony Williams, good morning. Michael Butte, good morning. Scott Woodward delivered big time. I love this hire. He should. Ken Bro, Jeremy Wiley, Sam Dixon, Troy Fuselier, David Rodrigue, Jake Matern. Does Notre Dame hire Mullen or Ogeron? Well, not Ogeron. Could Mullen be in the mix? Maybe, but again, I'm going to tell you, be on the look for Luke Fickell. Henry Burrell, good morning. Mark Vitanovich, Craig Duga. A bag of Funyuns was more of a head coach than Ed. It's funny. Y'all can all dogpile now. When I was out there on that island by myself for 5 years, y'all didn't say none. Tim Gautreau, what's up? Josh Higginbotham, what's up? Kirk Taylor, Brandon Williams, Stuart Boudreau, Trivia Carter, Joey Vincent, good morning. Let's see. Tim, I think a good coach has an 8-win floor at LSU. The ceiling is, can that coach have a legit shot at building the program to win other than win the other 4? Love the hire. I think Kelly can reach that. Yeah, I would agree. I think, your range. LSU, I'll put it to you this way. The best case scenario for LSU is what Mac Brown did at Texas. Winning double digits every year. Every year. That's the expectation. Winning double digits every year. And occasionally you're going to break through and you're going to win a championship. And if you can do that in a 4-year cycle, Brian Kelly can do that 2 or 3 times in Baton Rouge. And it's not unrealistic. Oh, let's see. Jesse Brown, why would fans not like this hire? The one thing I've seen, Jesse, as a pushback is Brian Kelly's record against the top 5. It's like, I don't know, someone put 3-20 or something like that against top 5 teams. So a couple things that I would rebut with that. Number one, because Notre Dame's not in the conference, again, not Brian Kelly's fault, but an issue that Notre Dame has. They don't have a built-in conference schedule, and because they only play 12 games, they don't have the possibility of a conference championship game. They're always going to be a game short, right? They can't play a a 13th game, excuse me. Look at this year, for example. If they had a conference championship game as a Power 5, they would be very clearly in the mix for the playoff as a 11-1 conference, 12-1 potential conference champion. Number one, because they have to load up their schedule with basically all Power 5 games, except maybe one or two a year, they do play a tougher regular season in that respect. And then, if you're playing that many games against top 5 opponents, that means every year you're playing a couple. In 12 years, he's played basically an average of 2 top 5 opponents every year. That's salty. That's SEC-like anyway. And you say, well, he didn't do well in those games. Fair. And I'll go back to what I talked about, which is it is really hard to recruit elite athletes to Notre Dame to the point where you can get a roster 1 to 85 of those guys to compete with Bama and Georgia and all that. Like, they get good players. But if you look at Brian Kelly, we went through some of the recruiting classes last night. In the last half decade, he's only had 1 top 10 class. And you're going to say, well, that means you can't recruit. No. The fact that he's got an average class grade of 13 in his time in South Bend is astonishing, because it is hard to recruit to Notre Dame. I'm telling you. It is not an easy gig to recruit there. So you give him the resources of LSU, recruiting the state of Louisiana, those top 15 classes become top 5 classes, and now he's going into those games a really good coach with a loaded gun. Let's see. Bob Champagne, morning, Matt. Appreciate your honesty yesterday. They weren't scrambling after all. By the way, any concerns at all about offense? So, Bob, I do believe they were scrambling a bit, because I'll maintain that, and we'll get the story in time. LSU was pumping the story that they were not really chasing Lincoln Riley, and that, I believe, is false. They put their best foot forward for Lincoln Riley, and he picked USC. And they pivoted once Lincoln Riley picked USC. And they got a deal done with a guy who they vetted early and wasn't necessarily interested. So they gave him a long deal and a lot of money, and awesome. They got a great coach. Ricky said, who's a better coach, Riley or Kelly? So that's probably, that's obviously subjective. If you gave me my choice today, let's talk this out. So the benefit of Lincoln Riley is he's 38 years old. And he is the quarterback guru. He's the guy that recruits and develops quarterbacks. And I've maintained that that's what you need in football to win at the highest level. You need to recruit and develop elite quarterbacks. He's done that. 38 years old. He could be the coach there for 25 years. He could be your Steve Spurrier, your Bob. Well, I guess Spurrier was only at Florida for 12 years. Felt like a lifetime. He could be your Bob Stoops. He could be that guy. But he also has a long eye on the NFL, and you may only get him for a handful of years. Brian Kelly is more veteran, proven, maybe doesn't have the same reputation offensively that Lincoln Riley does in the modern game. But if you said, hey, you can have Lincoln Riley or Brian Kelly for 5 years, for the next 5 years, and then you're starting over, I'd take Brian Kelly. Look at the last 5 years. Their records, Brian Kelly, Notre Dame, and Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, their records over the last 5 years are separated by 1 game. Their records are almost identical. They're separated by 1 game. So I'd probably take the guy that's proven over a longer period of time that he could win, and took over not great situations and managed to win at all of them, as opposed to Lincoln, who did inherit a very stable elite program from Bob Stoops and continued building upon it. Let's see. SAT expectations make it hard to recruit at Notre Dame. Jeremy, I'm going to tell you, it's not just the SAT. Like, y'all listen. I went to an elite college preparatory school, had a cumulative 3.4 GPA, and I didn't get into Notre Dame. I went to Holy Cross in South Bend for a year, which is a feeder school run by the same priests, the Holy Cross priests that run Notre Dame. In 2 semesters, I had a 3.95, at a 4.0 and a 3.9. I had all they operated on a point system or half system, so you could have like a plus, B minus, whatever. I had all A's and a B plus. Still didn't get into Notre Dame as a transfer. It's hard to get in there. There's only 8,000 students thereabouts. Like, it is very, very difficult to get in. And if they do lax their admission standards for athletes, it is ever so slight. So they do intentionally shrink their admission pool, or their recruiting pool, I should say, because of their admission standards. So I'm telling you, to scour the country to find enough athletes that can get into Notre Dame, that are elite athletes, to compete at that level, and to get them to campus, is impressive, man. Let's see. Marquise Robinson, Kelly is better because he hires elite defensive coordinators. Look, I mean, you can look at the track record, right? Marcus Freeman, Elko before that, but lost Elko to Texas A&M. That's another thing. Like, he keeps losing coordinators in South Bend. I don't think you're losing coordinators at LSU. Maybe to be head coaches. Jason Duplantis, Brian Kelly wants that SEC smoke. Natty in 5 years. Mark it down. I believe they'll be in the playoff within 5 years. I absolutely believe that, because you're not that far. And he knows that. He's inheriting a program that's not that far from being back into the playoff. So, and he also knows he's got Walker Howard committed in this class. And by the way, let me remind you, Walker Howard took an official visit to Notre Dame. So he was at least considering playing for Brian Kelly in South Bend. So, needless to say, Walker Howard is now a lock to LSU, and I think this class very much stays intact, and you build upon it. Jarrett Pettijohn, morning Matt, still riding high after the Brian Kelly news. Good. I'm glad this is overwhelmingly positive. It should be. Chris Connor, seems most fans love the hire. All the LSU beat writers on Twitter hate the hire. Which ones? I haven't seen what people have written. I just, as soon as the hire came, we did a live stream last night for an hour and a half, and then I was making some calls last night sort of about how all the process worked out, and then woke up and I'm doing this. So. You need Arnaz Battle's take on this. Where is Arnaz Battle? I'd love to run him down, man. I do plan to get in touch with a bunch of guys who played for Kelly at Notre Dame and get them on the show. Yeah, a lot of y'all are pointing out like the Lincoln Riley stuff. Like someone mentioned, they're buying his houses in Norman, a house in L.A. Like, I saw that tweet, but does anybody know who that tweet came from? I mean, that's where I would caution you. Like, just because you see something on the internet doesn't mean that it's legitimate. I'm not saying that information is wrong. I'm just saying that information, I don't know that anybody has confirmed that. Like, the guy who tweeted it was, here, Robert Hefner. but nobody knows who, like Robert Hefner. Has listed here that he's an energy efficient guy, technology, politics, like. Then he says Sooner Insider with a smiley face emoji. Like, I don't know that anybody knows who this is. You know, like, I mean, maybe he's like a friend of Lincoln Riley and got the deal, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know who that is. So I don't. Anyway, it's irrelevant. But anyway, if that's all true, that's a great deal for him, for sure, and good on him. But I don't know. Okay, let's see. I got to get rolling because I got to get Drew to school. Locked on LSU coming up later. AFR 3, of course, we're going to have wall to wall Brian Kelly talk today. We'll talk to some of his former players. We'll talk to Notre Dame beat writers. We'll talk to, I'm going to try to get some current commits on maybe some current LSU players. So we'll get all that reaction today. We'll look forward to it. So thanks for being here with us. Oh, yeah.
When you need a roof, call someone you know. Scone and Terrio. All you need is hard Call Hardco Roofing. 364-1007.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. Of course, always shout out to Brock, the Baton Rouge Orthopedic Clinic. Do me a favor, 361 of you still watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Facebook, like the page, share the post, like the page, share the post, like the page, share the post. Y'all have an awesome day. We'll see ya. Peace. I'm out of here.